I've known this clip's existed for a long time, but I never got around to debunking it. The clip's a few years old. Joe Rogan had Bret Weinstein on, and the conversation steered toward cults. And as I quickly found out, Bret Weinstein is completely full of shit. I don't know if he's like this in any other area of his life. I honestly don't know anything about the dude. But he just unleashed a torrent of garbage with the confidence of somebody who knows what they were talking about. So let's take a look at the interview and see if we can set the record straight. Let's get into it.
Well, I
What do
mean,
you
you'd have
call
to
a
define
cult?
it. Yeah, you'd have to define
I
cult.
think that's way off because I think there's like a billion Catholics.
Well, if you're going to call Catholicism a cult,
It's a
then-
cult. I grew up in it.
Okay.
It's 100%. It's just a cult with a billion people. I mean,
well,
whenever you got a guy who dresses like a wizard and he's sitting on a golden throne.
oh boy,
He's
we're
talking
here,
about
are we?
people.
I'm going to challenge you
Okay,
on this.
please do.
Catholicism is not a cult.
What is the difference between a cult? I had a bit for my act. Let me just
Sure.
A cult is bullshit, and it's created by one person, and he knows it's bullshit. In a religion, that guy's dead.
Let me give you a little background on Bret Weinstein. He's a biologist, and he was a professor at a university for a while. There was some SJW stuff surrounding him for a while, but I don't really know anything about it, and I don't really care. All I really care about is his perspective on cults. There's a science to cults. It's a well-studied subject, and there are psychology experts who've written about it at length. Cults aren't a matter of opinion. They exist, and there are clearly defined criteria that qualify groups as cults. Now, there's some variation in the degree to which these groups are cults. But this guy seems to be acting like there's no clear definition for it. It's just whatever you feel. Now, as far as Joe Rogan goes, that's a funny bit. And I knew I'd heard it before, but I didn't know where it came from. People usually go with one of a few different definitions of cults. The first definition is broad-reaching. All religion is a cult. Every group I don't like is a cult. That seems to be the definition Rogan's using. One fatal flaw here is that religion and cults aren't synonymous. You can have non-religious cults, or you can have non-cult religions. Lots of cults like to use religion to further their goals, and some religions have turned into full-blown cults like Jehovah's Witnesses or Mormonism. But Scientology, for example, isn't a religious cult. They have religious status solely for tax-exempt status. It's a psychology cult. They even advertise that you can be a Christian and a Scientologist. Now, as you move up the ladder, you find they have their own creation myths about aliens and stuff. And Christianity eventually gets crowded out. But it isn't really a religious movement. It didn't start that way, and it isn't presented that way. Same with Jonestown, People's Temple. It was really more of a communism cult. There was a big Jesus aspect to it, but that wasn't the only aspect of the belief system. Decouple cults and religions from your mind. They're not the same thing. So that's the first definition people usually use. The second definition people use is the dictionary definition. This is what cults like to use to prove they're not a cult. The first dictionary definition is a system of religious veneration and devotion directed toward a particular figure or object. That's pretty far-reaching. The second dictionary definition is a relatively small group of people having religious beliefs or practices regarded by others as strange or sinister. These aren't very specific. There was a need for a more specific definition in the American court system because the US had, or more accurately has, a cult problem. So some psychologists went to work creating a clear, concise checklist. Extremism, radicalism, or cult status shouldn't just be decoupled from religion, since they can exist independently of each other, but they should also be decoupled from belief systems. When you think about it, Methodists have some really strange beliefs. The most moderate Muslim out there believes the most bizarre shit ever. It ultimately has nothing to do with the beliefs. It's about behaviors. All this stems back from the psychology community. Some red flags you should watch out for are things like financial exploitation, black and white thinking, personal success being linked to group success, use of thought-terminating cliches, rejection of rational analysis, critical thinking and doubt, information control, and a lot more. In my opinion, lots of Catholic churches meet the criteria to qualify as cults. I feel like there's some variation between churches, so I want to get down to a more specific group than something as broad as Catholicism, but I'm not opposed to calling it a cult. I just want to be more specific. Okay, now that we understand what the scientific community has to say about cults, what they are, and how they're defined, let's continue on with the clip. Joe Rogan was talking about having psychedelic experiences and how that's a scientifically repeatable experience, where religious experiences are not reliably repeatable.
There's going to be a certain percentage of those people that go, what was that? That's not what I thought it was. I thought I was going in there to have a good time, and I just communicated with God.
Yep.
Air quotes God.
Yeah, air quotes. Well, but air quotes God is marvelous because air quotes God is the real deal.
Yeah.
Right? In other words, it's not a dude on a cloud.
Right.
It's something, it is a metaphor for something lodged very deep in the mind where you can't find it directly. And this is a hack that many cultures have used to access that layer.
I'm sorry, this just isn't making any sense to me. Are these ideas too high level for me? Is that the problem? Am I having trouble understanding because my brain is in recovery mode or something? What the fuck does he mean when he says air quotes God is marvelous because air quotes God is the real deal? What's he mean when he says it's a metaphor for something? This doesn't make any sense. Is he just making this shit up? As I said, Bret Weinstein is a biologist, so naturally he's gonna look at things from a biological perspective, which is understandable. In the next section, he says, biologically speaking, dreaming must serve a purpose.
You're not tripping in your sleeping mind for no reason at all. You're doing it for productive reasons. Logically speaking, it has to be the case that if you're burning energy and going through the costly exercise of thinking, even in this psychedelic way, that it's happening for a reason.
That's not true. I'm not a biologist, but that is a ridiculous proposition, logically speaking. Dreaming could be a byproduct of another process that's necessary. Or maybe it was necessary at one point, but it hasn't been necessary for hundreds of millions of years. Many other mammals, birds, and even reptiles dream. That implies we've likely been dreaming since before mammals even existed. Just because we have a tailbone doesn't mean it serves a purpose for us. There are a billion examples of things that appeared in a population that expended energy, but not enough energy that the population lost favor to one that didn't expend that energy. This is basic biology. Why is he saying this shit? He is a biologist. Let's continue.
When you say Catholicism is a cult, I don't agree, because Catholicism historically must have been delivering messages that caused people to correct their thinking in ways that made them collaborate more effectively, that made them better able to find the opportunities in their environment.
Now that is fascinating. So what he's saying here is that something can't be a cult if it offers some benefit. What? That is nonsensical. Let me put it in biology terms. Imagine you have a group with a strong leadership, and that leadership demands you remain a member of the group, even though the leadership is straight up harmful to the members. If you don't remain a member of the group, they'll cut you off from everything and everybody you ever loved. Imagine that group ran the entire town. Everybody from the grocer to the farmer to the horse salesman was a member of the group. And if you lose your good standing within the group, if you do something the leadership doesn't like, no matter how trivial, the horse salesman won't sell you a horse, the landlord won't rent to you, the farmer won't sell you food. You have no choice but to wander into the woods and die. That's what excommunication was. That's how it started. That's how Catholicism controlled people hundreds of years ago. The group doesn't have to be good. It just has to make it worse to not be a member. That's how cults control people. That's why they don't die off. There are some towns in the US that are completely controlled by religious groups, from the ground up. But it isn't anything like what it was when Catholicism controlled everything. So modern cults like Jehovah's Witnesses can't force people to stop selling you goods or renting to you. They have to hit you where it hurts, your friends and family. And that's largely successful. That tactic still prevents people from leaving the group. Shunning has been an effective means of control for millennia. And it's wrong. Just because a cult is successful does not mean it's right or that it's good. That is completely absurd. A biologist with the credentials this guy has should know that.
One thing we can say, I believe for sure, is that religions that have stood the test of time did so because their value to the people who believed in them was so great that those that disbelieved were outcompeted.
That's insane. This is coming from a biologist. What the hell is happening?
Scientology, is that a cult?
Too early to tell.
Okay, but
Are you serious? Even Joe Rogan recognized how ridiculous it was to say something like that. And he's saying this with such confidence. He's just making shit up on the spot and has absolutely no knowledge of the situation. Not only that, but he does have knowledge of biology, and he isn't even applying that knowledge. What is going on here? I feel like I'm in the Twilight Zone. Honestly, I feel like people's brains completely shut off when the topic of religion comes up. And I'm 100% sure this guy has critical thinking skills. He couldn't have come as far as he has in life without them. He's just not using them right now. I can't blame him for that. No hard feelings, honestly. I just wanted to make the video to set the record straight because there was a lot of misinformation in this clip. I'm willing to hear anybody out on any subject. I don't have some great disdain for the guy. Maybe I would if I knew more about him. I don't know. Maybe I wouldn't. Maybe we'd get along great, but I needed to set this straight because it's ridiculous. Anyways, let's continue.
Scientology, is that a cult?
Too early to tell.
Okay, but let's stop.
Well,
because
but
we
hold
know
on.
the guy who created it.
Well, we do, but we all, so let me drag you back.
Okay.
So, by the way, I'm very uncomfortable with Scientology and what it does. But the problem is, as Scientology itself points out, if you looked at the inception of something like the Catholic Church, you might be equally troubled.
Sure, which is why I think they're both cults.
Well, but let's be careful about that.
Okay.
So
What do you think a cult is?
That's a solid question. Dude obviously has no idea what a cult is, and he's hoping nobody realizes that. Is he going to give us a description? Let's find out.
What do you think a cult is? What do you think a cult is?
Well, I think a cult is the predatory version. It is tapping into people's natural tendency to believe in what I call metaphorical truths, and it is using it very often to extract resources from them.
Like the
Cynical.
Catholic Church?
Well, no, not like the
No?
Catholic Church. The Catholic Church is so long-standing, and the population that has... I guess what I would say is if a population succeeds by believing in these things, then cult is not the correct...
I think you and I have different terms. We're using different definitions of the word cult then.
Yeah, I'd say so. Literally nobody I know uses that definition. That is absurd. If a population succeeds, then it's not a cult. What about the people who live under a dictatorship? That country may continue to exist for 1,000 years. It may even be one of the wealthiest countries in the world for that entire period of time. Does that mean it's not a dictatorship? There's a complete disconnect in logic here. I feel like if this dude sat down and thought about this stuff for like 5 minutes, he'd realize how ridiculous everything he's saying sounded. Like I said, I have no problem with the guy. Maybe I would if I knew more about him. But what he's saying here is absurd and completely disconnected from reality or accepted science in the field of psychology. It was even absurd when he mixed biology in, so I really don't know where this guy goes with it from here. There was a lot more to the interview, and there's a lot more I wanted to cover, but we'll have to hit it another day. Anyways, that's all I've got for you. If you like what I do and you want to see me continue to do it, you can support me in a few ways. First, there's Patreon. That's probably the best way. But if you want to get something back for your support, you can check me out on Teespring, or you can check me out on Etsy. I have a store where I sell all kinds of interesting stuff. Mostly it's 3D printed game stands, but I also sell these 2020 dumpster fire candle holders, or just regular dumpster fire candle holders, and I sell these signs. If you want to keep Jehovah's Witnesses or Mormons from knocking on your door, put these out front. Jehovah's Witnesses aren't afraid of anything, except apostates. And you don't have to be an ex-Jehovah's Witness to be an apostate. The term applies to anybody critical of the religion. So if you want to keep them away, then consider getting one of these signs. All links can be found in the description and the pinned comment. Okay, thanks for watching, guys.